What are some of the other key habits within physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being?
When it comes to physical well-being, pretty straightforward. Exercise regularly, at least 30 minutes 3 times a day. In addition, move. It's unhealthy to sit down for 8 hours straight in front of a screen. Some doctors argue that sitting is the new smoking. Now, when you look at the data, they are exaggerating, but not by much, meaning it's really unhealthy to be sedentary. Rule of thumb is, every 30 minutes or so, get up and take 20 steps, at least. Obviously, if it can be more than that, even better. So physical exercise, nutrition is very important for happiness. So for instance, there's a lot of mix-up around nutrition. You have the vegans who swear by their approach. You have the paleos who swear by theirs. Never the twain shall meet. And the question is, where do I go? Because both of them actually provide you with research. And by the way, both provide rigorous research. Where do you go? What do you do? Well, you go, the way I teach it, is I go for the non-controversial, low-hanging fruits, metaphorically and really. So for example, we know that fruits are good for you. Maybe not too many, but some fruit is certainly good for you. We know that a lot of vegetables are good for you. We know that processed food is not as good as food that is less removed from nature. We know that sugar is very unhealthy. And here is what we know more than anything, that moderation is important. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the blue zones, those areas around the world where people live the longest and they live the best. So it's not just that they live to their 90s and sometimes above 100. They're not tied to a life support system when they're in their 80s and 90s. They live well. And the question that Dan Buettner and other researchers asked was, what's unique about them? And the first thing that they established, it's not genes, meaning people who live in the blue zones and whose children, say, move out of the blue zones, they don't live longer than the average person. In other words, it's because of lifestyle. It's because of the way they live in these blue zones. And what are these ways? Whether it's Okinawa or Sardinia, Italy, or a place in Costa Rica, or Linda Loma outside of Los Angeles, or a Greek island, what is unique about these places? What's unique about them is many of the spire elements that I talked about. So for example, they walk a lot or they exercise a lot. They're physically active. They have a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. They have relationships. The other things, when it comes to food, they eat healthfully. You won't find extremes there, but I'll give you one example, which is a personal favorite. So in Okinawa, the residents of Okinawa, before every meal, have a mini prayer. And their prayer, and they usually pray to their ancestors, their prayer is, give me the strength to eat until I'm 80% full, which I love. Give me the strength until I'm 80% full, not to stuff myself, not to starve myself. In other words, in moderation. So this is important when it comes to nutrition. Sleep is very important. Recovery in general is extremely important. There's a lot of work on stress over the last few years, and stress has really become, public enemy number one. You look at the headlines in the newspapers, stress is the silent killer. Stress is what harms organizations, individuals, the world. Not true. Stress is not a problem. Think about it. You go to the gym, you stress your muscles when you lift weights. Not a bad thing, because you stress them once, twice, you go 2 days later, you stress them some more, you actually get stronger. This is what anti-fragility is about. You get stronger as a result of that stress. The problem is not the stress. The problem, rather, is the lack of recovery. When you lift weights and more weights and more weights, that's when you get injured. That's when you get weaker. But if you have recovery, whether it's physically in the gym or psychologically in life, that is when you actually grow from stress. So this is part of physical well-being. In terms of intellectual well-being, I mentioned earlier, learn, study, watch lectures online. We have so much access today, which is amazing. Ask questions, explore new fields that will not just make you happier, it will also help you live longer, as it turns out. So that's, intellectual well-being, relational well-being. Spend quality time with friends, with family. And when I say quality time, if we were talking 6 months ago, I would say make those relationships real, meaning face-to-face interactions, because 1,000 friends on social media are no substitute for that one BFF, best friend forever, that you meet with and you interact with live. But, today it's more challenging to have those face-to-face interactions. So what I recommend is cultivating deep relationships, even if it's through media. Put time aside, whether it's for a phone call, whether it's for a Zoom Skype conversation, whatever it is, but spend time with people you care about and who care about you. And spend that time when, phones are off, unless it's a phone call, and when distractions are off, so that you can be present and derive the most from that conversation. And finally, emotional well-being. The first thing, as I mentioned earlier, give yourself the permission to be human. Embrace painful emotions. They're natural, they're part of every life. We don't want to add a second level of suffering. And then cultivate pleasurable emotions. For example, express gratitude on a regular basis. It's very simple, very straightforward. You write down things for which you're grateful, or you go around the table with your family and each one says one thing or two things that they're grateful for. That contributes a great deal to happiness. Simple, straightforward. The key, as with all of the things that I talked about, is to create habits, to create rituals around them so that they're consistent, persistent, and that's how change comes about, through practice, ongoing practice.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.